In introducing the website, I'm doing so through three paradigms: system theory, leadership theory, and medical theory. So let's look at system concept or system theory. One of the dynamics in the intersection of human consciousness is that the whole, the one, is graceful and perfect. We have these glimmers, these glimpses every now and again at the edge of human consciousness of everything having a purpose, everything being perfect. But we can't pull it into consciousness when we wake up from the dream, when we finish the psychedelic trip. It goes back to looking wonky. And the most graceful geometric shape in the universe is the sphere. It takes less energy to transport something on a sphere than any other shape. That's why we have wheels, not squares or triangles. It's incredibly efficient and graceful, and the sphere is one. But when we build the sphere mathematically through human consciousness, we build it with a series of lines that overlap and intersect to create a sphere. We build it with a series of dots. And so the sphere is one, and it is an infinite number of planes, an infinite number of dots. The trouble is human consciousness cannot comprehend and have language for an infinite number of dots, an infinite number of planes, and so we create a heuristic system. We create a lens through which to view the infinite. That is very limited. We create a system. And while the sphere, in its infinite grace, is unconscious, the system that we create within the sphere is conscious. And it has limitations. Assuming we design a pretty good system, it might look something like this. It's not all that is, it is a representation of all that is lodged within language. And so we create these points. Now, rolling this circle would be a graceful experience. It would take less energy than to roll any other object. A triangle would be particularly difficult, a straight line, very difficult to roll. But this is a pretty good system, meaning it contains a lot of reality. And what you're going to have is bumps as you roll this angled shape. You're going to lift it up and it's going to clunk down. Lift it up and going to clunk down. And this leads to one of the Buddhist truths in human consciousness. Every system is imperfect because the system is what we're conscious of. But what we're conscious of is language. Try and think a thought without language. You can't do it. All thoughts are contained in language, which means that all consciousness, all human consciousness, is contained in language. So Lazaris talks about the simpler something is, the more difficult it is. It's easy to be conscious of a simple thing. It's good or it's bad. It's just 2 points, one or the other. But it's hard. And I think that's kind of the equivalent of trying to drive a car that has sticks rather than wheels. It takes a lot of engine torque to get up on the tip of the stick, and then it bangs down hard. Go up and bangs down hard. So you've got simplicity and hard. You get ease with complexity. Truly so. If we create 100,000 dots, it's not the perfection of the one circle. The one circle is an infinite number of dots, but certainly you're not going to feel a bump. the way you will with a 20-sided wheel, that has lines and planes. So the more complex the system, the easier it is. But it's harder within our limitations of consciousness to keep track of a 100-point system. A routine with 100 different things in it. It takes some getting used to work it into a system, but it may be easier than a routine that just has waking up and going to sleep and that's it. And so you have system theory, which says that if it's conscious, it is divided. It's divided with language, it's divided with thought, it's divided with distinctions. The sphere, the whole, is broken up into parts, but the parts are not perfect. And so every system creates a certain amount of friction, a certain amount of suffering, a certain amount of asymmetry. It's not the perfect whole, but it's conscious. And what happens in a good, evolving, life-affirming system is you might start off with a triangle, and you are that triangle. That's your paradigm, that's your thing, and you lean yourself hard over and you crash over to the right, and then you push again and you crash over, and at some point it occurs to you, if we cut off these tips that are so violent on this triangle and move them over into these filler points and had a six-shaped object, a six-sided object rather than a three-sided object, the bumps would be a lot less. And so gradually in the evolutionary path of consciousness, you move from simple, crude, violent systems of consciousness to more sophisticated, more graceful forms of consciousness. And the system gets more and more complex. It does not necessarily get more and more symmetrical, however, in its weighting and its load. You go to the car mechanic and you have them rebalance your tires. And what do? They spin the system really fast, and they notice where there's a wobble, because that's where you're wasting energy. Intelligence is the efficiency with which energy is transformed into sustainable human well-being. So it's inefficient to waste an extra gallon of gas every 100 miles because your tires are unaligned, so they balance them out. They repair the asymmetries in the system, because the system takes the least amount of energy when the weight is evenly distributed around it. Now, in an empathic system, because we're talking about systems of human beings, one, there's the understanding that the system is not perfect. And two, in an empathic system, the law of empathy states that whoever is in the most amount of pain within the system gets the attention and support of the system. You're in a group. If you want the group to stay together cohesively, and 3 members of the group need a refill in their wine, and 1 member of the group needs help out of the water because they're drowning. In an empathic system, one that will stay cohesive, everyone's attention ignores the people that need a wine refill until the person is out of the water. Why is the law of empathy necessary for cohesion? Well, in a sociopathic system, the person who's drowning is left to drown. Why should other people dirty their clothes, get wet? Why should we concern ourselves with another person in the system? Obviously, the system is flawed if something is drowning. In a competent, loving system, if people are exposed to water, they know how to swim. In a competent, loving system, the boat doesn't capsize or tip over. In a system that works, someone isn't drowning in the first place. So there's obviously something flawed with the system if someone's drowning. And since all systems are flawed in one way and create some degree of unnecessary suffering, it may be a poorly designed system that you decide, okay, next time we go out drinking, we put railings on the boat that we rent, and we check if people knew how to swim. So you refine the system as you experience unnecessary pain that's caused by a faulty system. But everyone participates in the faulty system. They're called cults or cultures. And we understand that our system creates millions of American homeless, that 1 in 50 children go away. There's obviously faulty systems, beginning with not teaching parents how to parent. It's got a big oversight. Everyone is going to be a parent in one form or another. It's one of the most important, influential skills in an entire person's life. It's one of the most essential aspects for any culture. So I know, let's not teach parents a single hour of competent parenting. And let's overlook the fact that intergenerational abuse systems patterns occur intergenerationally. And so we can predict, based on the amount of abuse, trauma, and addiction in the last generation, that there's going to be a heck of a lot of abuse, trauma, and addiction in the next generation. But let's not do anything to protect the child. Why? It's not our problem. You have a sociopathic dominance hierarchy. If a politician wants to be elected in a democratic cult, then they've got to appeal to the people who are able to vote. So if you've decided that only people over the age of 18 can vote, you need to appeal to older people. You need to appeal to parents, not to children. Will parents vote for you if you point out their stupidity and their incompetence? Probably not. Let's abandon the child. So in a sociopathic paradigm, the law of empathy doesn't dominate. The law of mass dominates. We have more control and more size and more power and more money and more rank. So we're going to do what's good for us. And on that basis, as long as you can't affect us, we're going to throw you overboard or let you drown. It's just not our problem. Now, the reason that this destroys communities is that the person who is raped and then discovers that the reason their rapist is not thrown in prison is because the rapist is the son of the politician. And the politician controls the purse strings in a number of businesses that other people's dads are dependent on for money. So everyone protects the abuser based on fear and based on control. But the one who was raped understands on that day that they cannot respect or trust or feel safe with a single person who stands by and watches. Why would they? They've just learned the law of mass, the law of dominance, that says, I'm obviously low-ranking within my cult because I don't have as much money and control over other people's money, in a cult that considers itself a capitalist cult, where money is more valuable than the human beings who make it. If you ask 1,000 Americans and say, we're going to put you in a room here, nobody's going to know what you did. You can have an American and you can figure out what to do with them and how to do something good or whatever with them. You can have a person, or you can have $1 million. You can have $1 million, or you can have a human being. An American says, I don't know what to do with this person. I don't like them. I don't know them. I leave the person. I'll take the cash. I'll take the money that the person makes over the person who makes it. I don't value you. I want your money. For marriage, for business. I don't care who you are. I just want you to feel good so you'll spend lots of money in my business. I want your money, not you. So in a capitalist cult, what is measured is the accumulation of capital, not the accumulation of well-being or relationships, etc. There is no Forbes 400 list for the most empathic human beings or the most competent parents, or how many people are happy or anything like that, because that's about human beings. What's measured is the thing that the human beings create. They invented the idea of money, the symbol of money, and then they invented the money itself. And then that gets measured and elevated above the person. And so it's obviously a mathematically weak system, because it's the equivalent of saying that the golden goose who laid the golden egg is not as valuable as the egg that they laid. And many people feel that way. Treat their animals, treat their employees, etc., etc. You're only valuable for what I can get out of you. You are not valuable. The money you make me, the rank that you give me, the image that you help me portray, that's valuable. So if you give me that, fine. If not, I dispose of you. And so it's a form of chauvinism. The symbol of value becoming more valuable than the essence. The masculine outer expression more valuable than the feminine inner expression. So within system theory, and within a dominant chauvinistic system, if the person who wants the wine glass refilled has the money and the power, people don't rescue the drowning man or the drowning girl. They cater to the person in power out of fear and greed. These are the sociopathic drives within the reptilian brain. So in an empathic system, though, all attention turns to the person who needs the most help, the most immediately. Because everyone understands at some level that the system is not personal. The way you are treated today is the way I will be treated tomorrow. When we live in a cult that allows millions of Americans to be homeless, for the only reason that they don't have enough money to buy a home, in my neighborhood, the average home price is $1.2 million. So you can't find anything for less than $600,000. 72% of the homeless are locals, so they grew up here. This is what they call home, and they're given two options: be on the street or fork out $650,000 for a fixer-upper. Those are your choices. You don't like them? Stay on the street. But of course, this system doesn't work very well. There are more and more homeless people every single year. 1 in 50 American children run away before they reach 18 because the amount of abuses at home are too much to deal with. They would rather give up free rent and food than put up with the shame and cruelty of the American home. 1 in 50 reaches that breaking point. 1 in 10, 1 in 5 thinks about it. That's the level of cruelty in a system that doesn't educate its people. The science of feelings, not worth mentioning. Relationship skills, immaterial. 75% of your whole system in life will be about relationship skills. 75% of your salary determined by your social skills. Let's not teach you any other than bullying in high school. And so you have a flawed system. In order for there to be love, in order for there to be cohesion, for there to be a sustainable circle, you need the leadership model that it comes from the feminine. The dominance hierarchies, leaders eat first, sociopathic hierarchy based on fear and control. Simon Sinek, in his work with effective leaders and the military, leaders eat last. One of the reasons Hitler and Napoleon were so popular is they slept and shared they shared the threats, the fears of their troops. They spent time with their people. So a true leader in the Native American paradigm was not the one who told others what to do, it was the one who listened more. A feminine principle. So you have, I'm the one that can impose the most fear. I'm the one who listens to everyone else's need in the circle. I eat last. And everyone chooses them as the leader because for a sustainable culture to exist with love, everyone at the table must be treated with dignity, which includes the honoring of their human needs to survive, feel secure, feel love and belonging, have self-esteem, develop their gifts, be honored, and bring abundance into the world with those gifts and be a part of something bigger than themselves. So we're dealing with a feminine leadership paradigm that is about supporting everyone else so everyone chooses them as the leader, because they understand that the circle is healthiest with that principle. It's not about rank. It's not about money. It's not about birthright. The true leader is the one who cares for more people than any other person and acts accordingly. This is leadership in service. It's leadership from the adult. The adult is the one who loves those who need the most love. The dictator is the one that takes from those who cannot defend themselves. You have the reptilian brain, you have the empathic brain. Reptilian, empathic. Crocodiles prey on the weakest for their own benefit. Real kingship serves the most vulnerable in the community with the question, how can I help? There's an outward-looking focus. Now, in a system like this, you have transit friction. This is a transition point. We're coming along, energy is moving freely. You can imagine, for example, if you work with plumbing at all, or you've worked with sand or anything else. When you're directing energy, if you're running in a straight line, it's easy. But if you have to make a right angle turn, you have to slow down, spend energy stopping yourself, redirect yourself, and go off at a new energy. This is why every conscious system is less efficient than the unconscious whole out of which it is formed. The feminine principle of the sphere is the most intelligent, is the most graceful, but it's unconscious. By the time we become conscious of it, it's limited and bogged down by the distinctions in our language. And that means lots of straight lines, trying to connect the dots, trying to move towards symmetry in a well-designed system. But you have friction as energy that's moving along has to pivot and move along here and pivot again. And systems that are held together by human beings have stress at these transit points. These people have to hold container as energy rushes at them from this way, and they have to push it off in this way. Otherwise, the system breaks down. But this isn't too bad of a system. It's going around in a rough circle, roughly symmetrical. But it does leave a shadow. The shadow is the bit that it's the gap between the lineal lines of the system and the curvature of the sphere in its feminine unconsciousness. It leaves a gap. This is a pretty elegant system as far as systems go, because there's not much of a gap. If you were to put a circle around this triangle, half of the circle would be out of the triangle, meaning half of the circle would be unconscious, which means that half of the circle would be dishonored, would be violated, and create pain. Whatever is unconscious within your paradigm, you violate. And whatever you violate causes a mutual dishonor, as what you violate becomes polarized against you, and you become polarized against it in an unconscious state. So you have the shadow. You have the friction point. Now, in dominance hierarchies of a sociopathic nature, you have a rank system that's similar to the British boarding school system, in the fagging system. So you have the upper boys, the people who have the most confidence, have the most experience, have the most luxuries, etc. As the youngest new boys come in, the youngest in the pecking order get humiliated, shamed, treated like shit in every way, and they slowly earn rank over the years to where the people at the top have all the best food, all their whims taken care of, get my jacket, massage my feet, do this, do that, do the other. And the people that need the most support, the youngest and the newest and the smallest, are abused the most. So this is the typical dominance hierarchy in a sociopathic system. And when you have sociopathic parents, you raise sociopathic boys. When you send a bunch of sociopathic boys off to boarding school, they just reenact the dominance hierarchy using superior mass. The little kid doesn't like it, of course, but after they've been beat up and humiliated a few times for falling out of line and tolerated as they go into the fawn mode of traumatic coping mechanism, well, the system perpetuates itself. So you have a scapegoating. In a sociopathic system, all the stress is transferred to the people least able to deal with the stress. The youngest, the smallest, the females, the poorest. Let's let the poor have the highest interest rates on their credit card. They won't object. They've got nowhere else to go. Let's charge them 25%. It's wonderful. And the people who are the wealthiest, who invest in the credit card companies, they can get richer at the expense of the poorest. Who's going to listen to a poor person in a sociopathic cult? No one. They have no clout. They have nothing to frighten us with. We can use them. We can feed them. Little homeless girl. I'm sure she'd be an easy rape target. Why should I worry about someone who can hire an attorney and all that? I'm an abuser in an abuse cult. And so this is the reptilian concept. And so you have scapegoating. Now the problem with scapegoating from a mathematical point of view is one part of the system. It's like you've got a plumbing system. All systems are partially open. So energy comes in the system, they go through the system, and then they leave the system. And the energy is changed in the process. But only if the system holds together. So in a plumbing system, the weakest fitting in the house is the most likely to burst. Now, how do you create the most weak fitting in the house? Because no intelligent plumber sets you up with one weak fitting that holds the pressure of the entire system. It's just stupidity. But in social systems, obviously ignorant and stupid because we don't get emotional and psychological and relational literacy in any of our education systems, and our culture is an abuse cycle in action. It's not, somehow an enlightened expression of love and empathy. What happens in America when you really need help? All your friends don't show up. That's what happens. What happens when you really need a loan at a bank? That's when they won't give you one. If you've got billions at the bank, here, have a few million. We'll give you the lowest interest rate imaginable. Anything else we can do for you? Because you don't need us. If you need us, we're not giving you a penny even at 25%. And so it's sociopathic, not empathic. Scapegoating is when one child in the system, usually the most sensitive child, is targeted to be the black sheep and everyone blames everything on them. Meanwhile, the golden boy, it's usually a boy in a chauvinistic culture, who doesn't really need any advantages. Maybe they're handsome, maybe they're taller, whatever it is, something makes them the cult favorite. And so they get everything. The person who has everything gets even more, and the person who is traumatized and a misfit to the cult dogma gets the entire shame of the entire family dumped on them. So you have a weakening of the system, because when you take a faulty system to begin with, every system is, and you target all of the pressure. So like this joint has 50 psi, but it's too lazy to deal with it, and it's in a dominance hierarchy, so let's add 50 here. And every area it gives another 50 psi to this one area. That pipe bursts. Then you've got to go out and get the system to work again by finding another person willing to be treated like shit. Because in a sociopathic system, there's no awareness of empathy. There's an awareness of power. There's an awareness of, I can get away with this, so I will. And no one will defend the vulnerable in a sociopathic paradigm, because the vulnerable have nothing to offer to the powerful who could defend them. And so you get violence, you get civil war, you get revolutions, you get dissent, you get riots, predictable. And it costs more money to repair the damage from such suicides, violence, mental, emotional disease, etc., than it would cost to repair the system or treat people with dignity. But in a sociopathic abuse cult, the whole game is to pass on as much shame and cruelty and hate as you can to someone further down the system, because there's no technology for healing the cruelty, the pain, the shame that has been given to you. So the whole point of being at the top of the dominance hierarchy is I get to give my inadequacy to anyone, and they have to take it or I'll kill them, or I'll drive them to bankruptcy, or I'll seduce their daughter. I'll do something to hurt them. Donald Trump says, what I do is if anyone offends me or hurts me, I make sure to hurt them 5 times more. And I'm always trying to climb, pretending I'm richer than I am, and stuff, so that I can have more clout to frighten more people. Because he learned as a small child that who he was as a human being didn't matter. That the only thing that mattered was money. And so he wanted a lot of it so that he could pretend to matter. Of course, he knows he doesn't matter. He knows his money matters. So it really matters that he has, or the appearance of having a lot of money. So this is all system theory, and scapegoating destroys systems in the same way that putting all the pressure in the house plumbing system on the weakest joint blows the system, the water floods out, and then idiots go and do the whole thing again. They find a new scapegoat, and blow it out, and then do the whole thing again, and just keep rupturing the system. The process of evolving and dealing with a system is, number one, to define the system. Number one, measure the well-being at each point in the system. So these are human beings here. So if you're wanting to create a sustainable system, you measure the positions at each place in the entire system. You understand that it is only chauvinism and ignorance that says that this person is more important than this person. The wheel doesn't turn unless you have spokes at every point. The dogma says that these are important people and these are useless people. And that dogma is used to bankrupt cities, ship businesses overseas, destroy towns, cause divorces. These people are more important than these people. So you measure the well-being at each point of the system. Because if there's one person that's carrying all the pain for the dysfunction in the group, that's the weak point in the system. It's not this person's fault. It means there's an abuse dynamic that's threatening the entire system that's being borne by one person. You measure the relative well-being of those coming into the system and those coming out of the system. So if someone joins the system at age 20 and leaves the system at age 40 or 50 or when they're dead, you look at what were the resources available and how much well-being was added to and accrued as a result of joining the system. And that is the measure of the intelligence of the system. One measures the intelligence by the efficiency with which energy is transformed into sustainable human well-being. So you want to get a sense, is it a good system to begin with? You also get a sense of how symmetrical and asymmetrical it is. The more asymmetrical the system is, 2 or 3% of the people getting most of the value, that's a faulty system. Measure the relative well-being of those coming in and those leaving the system. Measure the trends in the system. Is the system growing or failing in various aspects? You get a sense relative to the goals. To use the medical terminology or the medical paradigm, you understand that, first of all geometric shapes are not as perfect as the sphere. And secondly, that in the complexity and tensions of life, systems get corrupted. So this line isn't exactly the same distance as this line. It was intended to be, but it gets warped out in the field. So this diagnosis determines how much corruption has occurred within the system, as well as how well the system is designed. This is a pretty good design because it's symmetrical. It doesn't leave that much of the sphere out. You can have some absolutely crazy zigzag designs where it's unsustainable, leads to lots of pain. It's not functional. It takes lots of energy to create lots of suffering. You measure, and so when you heal something, you make it whole again, because whole is and spherical is where the disease dissipates. It's where the friction reduces. So when you take your tire to the tire balancer, and there's more weight here, so it wobbles at this point, you add a weight over here, or you take the weight off where it's too heavy. You get it to where it is symmetrical again. So you spread the load evenly on the system. You say, if we want this system to grow and be abundant, we've got to take some of the pain created by the system and give it to this person, this person, this person, this person, this person, this person, this person. Now, what may happen if you give the pain back to all the people in the system is cooperation to change the system. This could happen. Wait a minute, I don't want to feel pain. It was fine if you took the pain. I didn't need to change the system because I'm creating pain and I'm giving it to you. I'm creating problems with my stupidity, but I'm asking you to fix the problems so I can remain stupid. It's fine. It's wonderful. But now that I have to solve the problems created by my own stupidity, I guess I shouldn't be so stupid. My crew has 100 excuses as to why they wasted this money and broke this material and this and that and the other. As soon as I say you're paying 20% of it, I'm the business owner, so I'll pay 80% of it. But there is a cost to you, some cost of this waste and stuff. Well, suddenly it's a big issue. And suddenly materials have to be saved and not this and this and this because you're sharing the pain. Anytime you have an abuser protected from the pain caused by their incompetence, carelessness, stupidity, you promote that problem. At the same time, it's in everyone's interest to do a good job training the staff, to find people that like this work, etc., etc. So you're measuring the system by how well it works for everyone at each of the different stress points. So you spread the load evenly. You also, the more toxic the system, the quicker you have to rotate in and out. Amazon is a very toxic workplace for most of the packers, etc. So it's not good for them to stay in that for a decade. It can destroy their soul. They're treated like animals. But it may be a system that's functional to get off the street and do this and then go from there to something that doesn't destroy them quite as rapidly. So the more toxic the system, you have to rotate in and out more rapidly if you're not to be destroyed by the system. An incredibly sophisticated system builds you up, meaning every one of your human needs, survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem, developing your unique talents, bringing those into the world with honor and abundance, and becoming a part of something bigger, is realized. And you leave the system with significantly more of all of that than you did going in. So that's a competent system. It's a competent system designed by a competent group of human beings, managed and maintained by a competent group of human beings. And finally, you improve the system. This is not a perfect system. So you cut off this corner, which is a difficult bump. You cut off this corner, which is a difficult bump, and you fill in this bit here. You make it a little bit more complex and a little bit more symmetrical. And in doing so, you reduce, if you did that, it's now 50% smoother. If you do that on every point. Now, you need a feedback loop for this to occur. You need a feedback loop for this to occur. And the feedback loop is where is the pain coming and when is it coming in each area of the enterprise, the community, the company, the relationship. And then you look at the design of the template of behavior there, and you say, how could we smooth that out? How could we smooth that out? For example, you have the dynamic in a couple where many men, when they come home from work, have 3 things in their mind they have to do to unwind and complete the day, and then they can connect socially with their family. So they walk in the door, and they're focused on those 3 things. Their spouse says, "Oh, honey, tell me about this and this and this." They walk away irritably or say, "Shut up." The spouse feels hurt and pursues them. So you have a system of arrive home and needs clash. When you interject into that system the arriving home ritual and say, honey, what I need is 15 to 20 minutes from the time I walk into the door until I've wound down, completed my to-do list, and am fully available for you. So from the time that I get home, we are introducing an arrival settling template. It's a more complex design. It's a ritual, an arriving home ritual. And I will announce when that ritual is over. And then I would love to hear all about your day. Now you've taken a pain point of two different needs with invisibility. I don't understand your needs, you don't understand mine, they're clashing. There's no space. You've interjected the complexity of a arriving home ritual. And now you can live together in that much more domestic harmony. And so you cut off the point, you add in another point. There's more and more grace and less bumps in the system, but it requires transparent communication, a paradigm of empathic rather than sociopathic leadership, and it requires a diagnosis of imbalances and a rebalancing. And then you have a sustainable system that creates significantly more value than it takes away throughout the entire system, so that someone comes into the system and leaves the system better off, and feels loved, feels empathy towards the system. That the system was a foundation of growth and becoming, as opposed to a rupture, a violation, a degradation, a betrayal, etc., etc. And so, as we look at the systems involved here, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at sociopathic leadership rather than empathic leadership. We're looking at concentrating toxicity rather than healing toxicity. And we're looking at the balancing of the system, and an intelligent designer of system understands it's not perfect and is as interested in the shadow, that which is blocked out by their system, as they are in the system. Because you need that data to continually refine the system, and is interested in a sharing of power based on competency and love, the masculine and feminine expressions of the same thing. Competency means you know what you're doing. Love means you care about other people as you apply your competency, the masculine and feminine expressions.